The ship reached shore, but no one came with it. Their boots were still inside, their food still on the table. The people were gone.
10 people vanished from a perfectly safe ship. No struggle, no bodies, no warning. Now, go quiet with me for a moment. The horizon stretched endlessly across the Atlantic Ocean. Not peaceful, just empty.
Seabirds drifted overhead without urgency. The waves moved slowly, like the ocean itself was holding its breath. Then, someone saw it. A ship. Not moving. Not signaling. Just drifting. Her sails were still raised. Her hull leaned slightly, like something too tired to stay upright. At first, it looked ordinary. Just another merchant vessel riding open water. But as the crew approached, something felt wrong. No figures on deck. No footsteps. No answering call. The ship floated there like a sentence without an ending. Imagine you're standing there. Salt on your lips. Wood creaking beneath your boots. A ship that should be alive, completely empty. They climbed aboard expecting routine. Maybe illness, maybe mechanical failure, maybe a tired crew resting below. Instead, they found nothing. The deck was wet, but intact. The cargo hatch was sealed. The lifeboat was gone. Inside the cabins, personal belongings were still neatly arranged. Navigation charts lay open on the table. Beds were made. Clothes were folded. Someone had been here, very recently. But now, no one was. They moved deeper into the ship. Each room revealed more human traces. Papers stacked carefully in the captain's quarters. A woman's hairbrush resting on a shelf. A child's shoes beside a bunk. No signs of violence. No blood. No overturned furniture. No damage. Just people-shaped silence. Only then did they walk toward the stern. Only then did they see her name, painted in fading letters across the back of the vessel. Mary Celeste. She had departed weeks earlier on a routine commercial crossing. Nothing dangerous, nothing dramatic, just an ordinary crossing. The captain had brought his wife. They had brought their young daughter. They packed clothes, books, keepsakes. They wrote letters home. They expected to arrive. Instead, their ship did, alone. 10 people had vanished. The captain, his family, 7 crew members, gone without a single witness. The vessel itself was still seaworthy. Her hull was sound. Her cargo remained largely intact. Her compass still pointed north. Everything necessary for survival was still on board, except the humans. And that's what makes this unbearable. People don't abandon a functioning ship in open ocean. Experienced sailors don't climb into a small lifeboat unless staying feels more dangerous than leaving. They don't walk away from shelter unless something feels immediately fatal. Fire, explosion, collision. But there was no fire, no explosion, no collision. Only clues that refused to agree with each other. The navigation instruments were damaged. The ship's chronometer was missing. A small amount of seawater had entered the hold, not enough to sink her. Some of the cargo had leaked invisible fumes. The weather had been unstable days earlier, but none of it explains why an experienced captain would order everyone, including his child, into uncertainty, especially with land hundreds of miles away, especially with a solid ship beneath their feet. Somewhere between calm waves and empty sky, a decision was made. Not slowly, not casually, quickly, urgently. A decision powerful enough to override survival instinct. They lowered a small boat, they climbed inside, and they pushed away from safety. Maybe they believed they would return. Maybe they thought the ship was about to explode. Maybe they sensed something we can no longer measure.
No one saw it happen. No one heard their final conversation. No one knows who spoke first. No one knows what they saw. All we have are quiet details. Warm clothing left behind. A captain's papers waiting to be signed. A meal interrupted. And a vessel drifting patiently across open water, carrying the echo of 10 vanished lives. This isn't a story about pirates. It isn't a story about storms. It isn't a story about monsters rising from the deep. This is a story about ordinary people who stepped away from safety and disappeared into the ocean. And whatever forced them into that small boat was stronger than fear, stronger than reason, and it has never been explained. That is where our story truly begins.
When they began documenting the vessel, one thing became immediately clear. This was not a wreck. This was not an abandoned hulk. This was a working ship, paused in time. Later records confirmed that she had departed weeks earlier from New York City, bound for Genoa. A routine commercial crossing. Nothing experimental, nothing dangerous. Just an ordinary crossing. The man in command was Benjamin Spooner Briggs. He was not reckless. He was not inexperienced. He had spent most of his life at sea. Other captains trusted him. Crew respected him. Friends described him as careful, religious, methodical. He had made this crossing before. This time, he brought his family. His wife. Their 2-year-old daughter. It wasn't a business decision. It was a human one. 7 crew members joined them. All healthy. All experienced. All aware of the risks of ocean travel. The record showed no conflict, no fear, no urgency. The ship's log described calm seas, moderate winds, normal progress. The last entry was written days before the discovery. It mentioned weather, position, routine observations. No distress, no warnings, no hint of what was coming. And yet somewhere between that final line of ink and the moment the ship was found drifting, everything changed. Investigators later noticed small details. Navigation instruments were damaged. The main chronometer, essential for determining longitude, was missing. A small amount of seawater had entered the hold, not enough to threaten the vessel, just enough to cause concern. More strangely, several barrels of industrial alcohol had leaked, not visibly, not dramatically, but enough to release invisible fumes, fumes that could build pressure, fumes that could make a captain fear explosion. Even with that possibility, the ship was still stable, the cargo was secure, the hull was intact. Nothing suggested immediate disaster, and yet the lifeboat was gone. Lowered deliberately, not torn away, not smashed, used. That detail matters, because it means the crew didn't flee in chaos. They didn't jump. They didn't panic blindly. They organized. They prepared. They chose. Every personal item told the same story. Valuables were left behind. Clothing remained folded. Food and water were untouched. If this had been piracy, something would be missing. If it had been mutiny, there would be damage. If there had been violence, there would be blood. But there was none. Only order, only quiet. Just people-shaped silence, which suggests something far more unsettling than any storm. They believed leaving was temporary. They expected to return. Some researchers believe Captain Briggs feared a buildup of explosive gas. He may have ordered everyone into the lifeboat while keeping it tethered to the ship, planning to wait until conditions felt safe. Others believe he worried about flooding, that he thought the vessel was slowly taking on water, that he wanted to assess the situation from outside. There is also evidence that a rope may have snapped. If that happened, the lifeboat would have drifted away, and the ship, still under sail, would have continued on alone. Imagine that moment. You're in a small boat. Your ship is only yards away. Then suddenly, it isn't.
The wind catches her sails. She begins to pull forward. You shout. You wave. You try to row. But the distance grows. Slowly. Cruelly. Until the vessel carrying your food, your shelter, your future, becomes a shape on the horizon, then nothing at all. If that's what happened, then they didn't abandon the ship, they lost it, and what followed would have been silent.
No engines, no radio, no rescue flares. Just 10 people in open ocean with limited supplies and no direction. History offers no mercy in situations like that. The sea doesn't negotiate. It doesn't pause. It doesn't return what it takes. When the ship was finally brought to port, inquiries were held. Testimony was taken. Experts argued. Newspapers speculated. Some suggested sea monsters. Some suggested conspiracy. Some suggested paranormal forces. But no theory could account for every detail, because the most important witnesses were gone, and the ocean does not testify. All that remains are probabilities, guesses, fragments, a captain's reputation, a child's abandoned shoes, and a timeline that ends too early. Whatever happened aboard that ship was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was quiet. A sequence of small decisions made under uncertainty, and one moment where control slipped away. 10 people stepped into a lifeboat believing they were choosing safety. History suggests they were choosing the last minutes of their lives, without ever knowing it.
The ship eventually reached shore, but the people never did. When authorities finally finished their investigation of the Mary Celeste, they were left with paperwork instead of answers. Statements, cargo manifests, navigation charts. None of it explained why 10 human beings had vanished. There were hearings. Witnesses described the condition of the vessel. Experts debated gas leaks and seawater. Officials argued about ropes and weather patterns, but every conclusion ended the same way. Probable cause, not certainty, just guesses. No bodies were ever recovered from the Atlantic Ocean. No lifeboat washed ashore. No final message was found in a bottle. The sea kept everything. Captain Briggs' reputation remained intact. No evidence of recklessness, no sign of panic, no proof of wrongdoing. History remembers him as careful, which somehow makes it worse.
Because careful people don't make reckless choices, they make calculated ones. That means whatever convinced him to leave his ship felt reasonable at the time. His wife's belongings were cataloged, his daughter's presence noted in official records. But there is no document that captures what it means to lose a child to open water. No form for that, no checkbox, no ledger entry. The crew members became names in archives. Sailors with families who waited at windows and docks, wives who watched harbors, parents who reread newspapers hoping for corrections. None ever came. Over the years, the story attracted theories. Some said pirates, some said sea creatures, some said paranormal forces. But mystery doesn't need monsters. Sometimes it only needs one broken rope, or one misjudged risk, or one moment where a man believes he is choosing safety and doesn't realize he is stepping away from it. What makes the story endure isn't how strange it is. It's how ordinary it begins.
A ship on a routine crossing. A captain traveling with his family. A crew doing their jobs. No storm, no battle, no warning. Just a series of quiet decisions. And then, absence. Today, the Mary Celeste is remembered as a ghost ship. But that word hides something important. Ghosts imply lingering, echoes, presence. This story has none of that. Only disappearance. 10 people didn't become legends. They became missing. Their final moments weren't dramatic. There were no heroic last stands, no recorded goodbyes,
just a small boat drifting farther away from the only shelter they had, and a ship sailing on without them. This is not a story about mystery. It's a story about vulnerability, about how thin the line is between control and chaos, about how even experienced hands can lose everything in silence. Because whatever happened out there wasn't violent. It was quiet. And that may be the hardest part to accept. Somewhere beyond shipping lanes and history books, the ocean still holds their ending. Not as a secret, as an absence. And that absence has never been explained, only carried.
Time did what oceans always do. It moved on. Ports changed, ships became larger, navigation became digital. Crossings that once took weeks now take days. But the story of the Mary Celeste never fully faded. It didn't become history. It became a quiet reference point, a reminder passed between sailors, a paragraph in textbooks, a late-night search result. People still ask what happened, not because the mystery is spectacular, but because it feels close. Too close. Every explanation sounds almost reasonable. A rope snapping, invisible fumes, a drifting lifeboat. Each theory fits, until it doesn't. Because none of them explain the human part. None of them explain how a careful captain like Benjamin Spooner Briggs walked away from a stable ship.
None of them explain how parents leave shelter with their child. None of them explain why 10 people chose uncertainty over safety. Technology can measure wind speed. It can chart currents across the Atlantic Ocean. It can replay routes and calculate probabilities. But it still cannot reconstruct fear. It cannot recreate that moment on deck. The sound of water against wood, the pull of a rope, the weight of responsibility, the silence between decisions. Modern investigators have revisited the case. They've simulated conditions. They've tested cargo samples. They've modeled wave patterns. Each generation adds a new layer of logic, and each generation ends in the same place: possibility, not certainty. Because this story doesn't live in data. It lives in that small space between reason and instinct, where humans make choices without knowing the outcome. That's why it stays with us, not because it's strange, because it's familiar. Every person watching this has made a decision hoping it was the right one. Every person knows what it feels like to choose safety, to leave something behind.